be very basic, steampunk translates to steam Victorian punk for science fiction. Steampunk is taking something historical and then making it your own, effectively taking the punk idea of going against what's expected and doing that with history. If you like history and you like science fiction, then you're probably into steampunk. I was recently at Steamcon, and you get a very, very wide selection of people there. Some people just like the costuming. Some people like the gaming. We had people who are considered makers. They just like to build stuff. We had reenactors. We had sci-fi nerds, people who love Battlestar, and it allows for so many things, I think, because it is this kind of conglomeration. It's one of the reasons why it's grown so much. What makes a steampunk item, something that is steampunk, is historical or looks historical, or using it in a way that maybe in the past may have been inappropriate. A good example of this is my suspenders. In Victorian times, you would never see a man's suspenders. He would have to be wearing a waistcoat, and it would be considered indecent of him to be showing his suspenders. And not caring about that, I think that's one of the things that differentiates someone who's into steampunk from, say, a reenactor. Because a reenactor would know that, and they would follow the rules. Someone who's into steampunk says, you know, I don't care. Like, I like the aesthetic of it, but I'm not so keen on the rules, and I'd rather, you know, play it up in my own way. That's a very simple way. What if you walked down the street and saw some steampunk-inspired design on a mannequin or on a billboard? Personally, if I saw something on a mannequin or a billboard, I'd be excited because that means I could possibly buy it. I got really excited because Urban Outfitters had some pants that looked like jodhpurs, although they were for women, so they wouldn't have worked for me. What would be lost if it started to show up everywhere? Would it feel hollow and alienate original designers? I think sometimes it feels like that, but as far as making me feel alienated, probably not so much, because I think you'll find a lot of people, anyone who will dress up in Victorian clothing and walk down the street, is fairly good with their own self-image. But would I even consider it steampunk if a major corporation created it? Probably not from the outset. If a kid goes to a store and buys this whole steampunk Halloween costume, and, I'll be like, okay, the kid is dressed up as steampunk. I wouldn't necessarily say the kid is steampunk. They definitely follow the aesthetic, but I think that there's a part of things being handmade that is very intrinsic to it, kind of how they make it their own, and that's where they're effectively appropriating it. So I don't think a corporation really can make something that is steampunk. They can make things that look steampunk, but it's not going to be until someone touches it and does something with it that it will actually become steampunk. People look at stuff and they see that nothing in their life is personal. They buy and acquire so much, and there's nothing that they own speaks to them. And I think that's one of the reasons why steampunk is so popular, is because they're taking something and then they're making it personal. There's only going to be one of it. How would you feel if steampunk went mainstream and corporate? It's always going to be a subculture. It's not going to become a massive mainstream thing. There are a few of us who are expecting the mainstream wave for steampunk to come, because Disney was supposed to be remaking 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and so everyone was expecting that was going to be the thing where everyone jumped into steampunk all of a sudden. When it does open up, I think it's still going to retain its core values. Effectively, what's going to happen is you're going to have the small core of people who got involved in it, and then as the mainstream comes in, it's just going to start dumping more and more people on top of that. And you're going to have that core in the center, and then all of this fluff of people on the outside. And there are going to be those within the outside who are going to draw towards the core. But then after a period of time, the next fad's going to come along, and all the fluff on the outside is going to disperse and go into something new. And so the only thing that's going to happen is that the core will probably be better consolidated. It'll have better resources, because it'll at least spend some time at the top. It'll be better understood, and it'll be a little bit larger, but I don't think it's really going to lose anything. It'll change like all things change, but this is a subculture just like any other, It's interesting because it's a community that's not specifically done by nationality or location, geography, any of that kind of stuff. It's completely based on interest, and so over time, it's going to fluctuate, but because it's based on interest, it is defined by its core values, like what people make it to be. Because eventually the people that are losing whatever core values they expect there to be, they'll move on to the next thing, and they will leave effectively the more concentrated version. But I think I'd be excited about it because the thing about mainstream is that nothing stays mainstream for very long. And so that when it does drop off, I will still be here. Sure, there'll probably be a bunch of new faces, but effectively they've made it through the trials, if you will. They lasted past the meme. And when all these people who aren't really all that interested in it, they're just interested in the aesthetic, it means that when all of them leave, and they sell all their clothing or give their clothing away, I will eventually be able to get it from a thrift store. So it's all going to come back to me.